Thank you everyone for joining us. We're so excited to have you here today for the Digital Jewelry Summit. My name is Rachel, and today I'll be joined by Kent West and Doug Napier, who will be helping facilitate the webinar. First, I'm just going to quickly introduce B9Creations and explain a little about what we do. B9Creations offers high-resolution additive manufacturing solutions. From 3D scanning to 3D printing, our high-precision platforms have earned the trust of jewelers worldwide through digital solutions that deliver proven results and a payback measured in months. If you'd like to learn more about our jewelry solutions, please visit that URL there at the bottom, b9c.com/jewelry. Here's today's agenda. We'll be starting with the session CAD, What's Next with Kent West, and then we'll move into Strategic Design for Successful Casting with Doug Napier. And please note, we're being flexible with the schedule, so our second session will start around 10 a.m. Mountain Time. It may begin a few minutes before or after that, depending on the length of our first session. And we will be taking a short break in between each of these sessions, so you will have a chance to get up and take a break if needed. I also wanted to mention that we are recording this, so if you need to step away or if you miss a session, we'll be sending out the recorded version later this week or early next. All right, and we're ready to kick off our first session titled CAD, What's Next, where we'll be joined by Kent West, owner and operator of Pixel Zapper Studio. During this session, Kent will give an overview of the Panther interface, share tips and tricks on transitioning from Matrix to Panther, show live demos, and more. If you have questions throughout the session, feel free to submit them in the Q&A box and we will answer them at the end. All right, Kent, I'd like to kick it over to you now so you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. Hi, everybody. As Rachel mentioned, I'm the owner-operator of Pixel Zapper Studio. It's a huge conglomerate corporation comprised of me. And you can find me at, let me share my screen now. Rachel, can you release yours? Okay. Okay. You can find me at pixelzapper.com, and I do CAD modeling for the jewelry industry. I also do rendering for stills and animation. I do consulting and training, and I'm also the North American distributor for Panther. And if you want more information about Panther, you can find them at panther3d.com. And then lastly, I'm also a rhinoceros dealer. And in my webinar today, I'll be talking about Rhinoceros 7. And you can find them at rhino3d.com. Okay, so here is the Panther interface. And today I want to talk a little bit about a transition from Matrix 5 or Matrix 9, which is in Rhino 5, and also Rhino 7, which runs in Panther. And I'm going to go ahead and stop my video so that you're not distracted with my rugged good looks. And there we go. Okay, so here's the Panther interface. And as far as going from Matrix to Panther, it's not a huge jump in the sense that all the tools kind of feel the same. In other words, here's the different categories for builders or functions on the left here. And you'll notice that there's a gem section, and here's a gem loader, gem on curve, Pave builder. We have a gem on ring rail where the gem is associated with the rail, and then here's a 3-stone. And there's other tools that some of which I'll show today in the webinar. Then below that is settings, where there's a head builder, bezel, a claw style setting, under bezel, and then of course prongs on gems and so on. Panther also has some really nice jewelry tools, like a rope builder, a bail builder. Here's a hoop earring, and just some other tools that really help. Here's a mill grain builder. And so these are really pretty fun tools. In their ring section, they have pre-done rings. Here's an open shank, signet builder. Here's an eternity band builder, and then just a ring rail with an outer ring rail too. So a lot of these should be real familiar to Matrix users. Below that is the cutters library for stone cutters or cutting to a ring rail. Now in the tools section, a lot of these look like just Rhino tools as far as Booleans go and so on. But these are actually parametric features. And as I work today, I want to talk about parametric modeling, and some people are not familiar with parametric modeling, but basically it means that you can take and change parameters in a design, and then the other parts of the design will react to those parameter changes. And so it all is kind of linked together with a kind of history. And that's what we mean when we say parametric. The other parts are pretty familiar. These are basically all Rhino tools. We've got the curves menu, surface, solid, and so on. Now, Rhino 7 brings us sub-D modeling, and Matrix users up until and including version 8 had T-splines to use. And then GemVision had to get rid of T-splines because of marketing, or because of licensing rather, issues. And so Matrix 9 had T-splines taken out of it, much to the chagrin of most users. But now in Rhino 7, we have sub-D modeling, and it's very reminiscent of T-splines. It's very similar. And Panther adds some models that you can make in sub-D. Here's a shank, a signet, a band, and then a bezel. And so these are made in sub-D geometry, and then they can interact with other sub-D models that you create. And I'll touch on sub-D later in this webinar as well. Then we've got transforms and edits and so on. So let's go ahead, and to talk about parametric a little more, I'd like to open up a model that I made in Panther. Now, one nice thing that, because we're in Rhino 7 and in Panther, one nice thing that we have is the ability to drag and drop. And although that may seem like a fairly trivial thing, I never get sick of dragging and dropping. And of course, we can't do that in Matrix 9, so it's kind of a bummer. Okay, so here I have a ring made, a cathedral. And over here on the right, you can see the different functions that I use to build this ring. And so starting from the bottom and going up, we have a gem on a ring, and then the cathedral builder, and then here's the claw. Here's an ISO curve over here on the right side that was used to place the gems. And then of course the gems on curve and prongs. And then the last one is a mirror of the gems and the prongs to the other side of the ring. Okay. So what I did when I made this file is I went ahead and based everything off the gem on ring. Okay, so if I go ahead and click on the edit button here, we are now inside the gem on ring function, and I can start to change it. First thing that I'll do is slide this down to a size, or a 5mm center stone. And you can see that the head reacts, the cathedral reacts and maintains the distance to the pavilion. And then we've got the stones all reacted with the cathedral and so on. In the same respect, I can come over here and slide this up to, let's say, a 8mm. And if any of the features here, you'll notice the pavilion is a little low, the culette's down in here, we can still go over to raise the center stone or change the head or so on, but everything's reacting right now to what that's doing. So I'm going to slide this back down to something more affordable for me, maybe a 6.5 millimeter. The next thing that we can do is come over and change the center stone type. So I'm going to pick some different center stone shapes that make sense with the 4-prong head. So there's a princess. Here comes a cushion. Oh, let's do an oval too, just so we can see that. So there we go. And we can also change the finger size as well. So once I have this the way that I want it, we can also come over here and let's jump down to a size 4. Okay. And just so we can see it as well, let's jump up to a 9 or so. So there you can see that everything is reacting and changing to the different inputs that we make. I'll jump back down to a 6. And then just to show how this works, I'll go ahead and once the design is done, I'm going to go ahead and cut this peg out from the center setting. So I'm going to go ahead and commit this geometry by hitting the check mark there. And then I'll select the head and come over to cutters and go to cut to ring. Now, one interesting thing that Panther has is the ability to use different components of the design as input for a function. And here's what I mean by that. Right now, I have the ring rail for the gem is what's driving this box right here. But if you'll notice, this is still showing up in the, because this is a comfort fit, the head is still inside the finger rail. Well, what we can do is come over and set this to self. So now the cut to ring rail has its own ring rail size. And then I can come over and say, okay, give me a 6 3/4, and it cuts it bigger, but doesn't affect the rest of the ring. And so actually I have about 3 different ring rails in here, and I can use them in different ways based on what I want to do with each one of those operations. And so there is our design, and we can just always come back and open this design and change the different parameters and output production jewelry that way. Okay, so next what I'd like to do is I'm going to drag and drop a matrix gem layout. So when you open a file that comes from Matrix, Panther looks at that, and if it sees any gemstones that were matrix stones, it asks if you want to convert them so that they'll be Panther gems, and that way you can work on them with Panther's tools as you continue on that design. So of course I'm going to say yes, and here it's loading all the different gems, and here's the gem list, and as I mouse over that, you can see all the different ones selected. Okay. And there's also a ring rail out here. Okay, now this happens to be the matrix ring rail, and Panther doesn't really look at that as anything. We still have to define the Panther ring rail. But what I do want to do is go ahead and type the what command. And we'll notice that this is a 7 1/4 finger size. So we'll remember that for later. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is select these round stones, and I'm going to go ahead and put an under bezel on these. So I'm going to come over to gem settings. And here's the under bezel command. So I'll click that. And Panther has a library of predetermined shapes and sizes and different, here's a flat one and a puffy one. So these are library items that you can scroll through and find different solutions for what you want your under bezel to look like. You can also come over here and scroll down the list. And you'll notice down here, I'm going to kind of cooking show this a little bit where they have something already cooked and pull it out. I have an under bezel that I called under bezel Melly, and it doesn't have a cool preview because I was lazy, but right below that, you can also see the add button. So as you mix up your own different library items, whether it's a head, bezel, whatever, you can add that to your own library. So I'm going to go ahead and click on mine, and it'll load all those bezels. And I just made sure that the bezel intersected the finger, and here you can see what it looks like so. So if everything's cool with that, I'll hit the plus or the check, and that commits it to be geometry. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is come over here and real quick turn off that layer so that I can easily select the gems again. And this time, I'm not going to work with these two little ones here. I'll come back to those later. Let's see here. I accidentally right-clicked and started that again. Okay, so with this selected, let me go ahead and do that and that. And then I want to turn this layer back on so you can see what's going on. I'm going to come over to setting and do prongs on a row, which is right here. Okay, let's zoom in down here so you can see what I'm doing. First thing I'm going to do is change the thickness to 0.7. And so here you can see we have all these different options to change the prongs on the ends of the prongs, different options, and so on. So there's the size of my prongs right now are 0.7. I'm going to give the bench person a little more height here, some metal to work with. Okay, and then the depth I'm going to slide down so that it intersects the finger as well. And then you'll notice over here on some of the smaller stones, that 0.7 is a little heavy. The good news is the gems won't probably fall out. However, that's not really what I'm looking for. So I'm going to come over here to options and turn on gradual sizes. And then Panther looks at the stones and the relationship of the prong to how much metal is over the girdle, and we'll graduate those sizes. And that pretty much is what I'm looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and commit that geometry as well. Next, I'm going to work on one of these little stones here. I'm not going to work on both of them. I'm just going to do one, and I'll show you why. So I'm going to go ahead and select that stone, and then I'm going to pick prongs on gem. So this just addresses one prong or one gem at a time. And let's go over and change the number of prongs to just 3. And I'm going to change the size to, let's see, 0.5, let's say, like so. And then I'll also increase the depth so it matches the other ones. And then I can come back to prongs and I can rotate this about that stone and get this so that it's touching this other prong so that it'll actually stay there once we make this piece of jewelry. And I did this one separate from this one because if you wanted to rotate these individually, you would need to do them individually. Otherwise, they'd rotate at the same rotation. And that's good enough, though, for this example. Now, for the marquees, I thought it would be cool to have kind of a scalloped bezel type setting that I could manipulate up here. And so I had one that I made in Matrix. And so here's my marquee setting. We'll just drag it over here and click import. And there it is. Next, I'm going to use a function called copy to gems. Okay. And to do that, I'm going to need a reference gem down here. So I'm going to go to the gem loader. And I'm going to switch this from round to marquee and tell you the 0.7 over here. And there's my marquee loaded right there. So I'll go ahead and commit that. Okay, so next we're going to click this function and let's see what's up. So the object to copy, we can click on this down arrow here, and then as we mouse over different things in this list, it's picking different geometry. Well, that's a poly surface sitting down there, so we can just simply click on poly surface. The reference gem, if we click here, should be the first marquee in the list, and it is, so I'll pick that. And then under target gems, if you have a bunch of them located all around the document, you may not want to scroll through that list. So you can also come over here and say select from document. And then I can come over and pick this one, and then you can see it says press enter when done. And so I will. And then it puts these massive bezels up there, at which point I'll just come over to options and tell them to be the correct size or the original design size. And there they are. So we'll just go ahead and commit those. Now what's nice is I can still manipulate this geometry and it will update out on the document. So if I want to move that up or down, there's still history with that object. But I'd like to take it a step further, and I'm going to go ahead and import this cutter that I made, because I would like this to have kind of a comfort fit right here. So I'm going to go ahead and take this, and I'm just going to type Boolean. I'm not worried about any history with this, so I'm not going to use the Panther Boolean, but we'll go ahead and just cut the bottom of this like so. Okay, now you'll notice that these did not change. And the reason they didn't change is that this is now a new object with a new ID, and therefore it's not the object that was put up there. But we can very easily come over here and go back into the options for this. And under object to copy, we will simply come down and pick the new poly surface. And there you can see it immediately updated that. And I'll hit OK. Now, the nice thing is that now we can come over here and manipulate this one. And as long as we don't do something to change its ID, it'll still work and still update. All right, I guess there's just a couple more steps for this project. And that is, let's come over and we'll select all these different objects here, the under bezels and the prongs. And we'll come over to cutters again and do cut to ring. And if you recall, when I described which object is the one that is acting like the cutter, we will put that to self so that the cut to ring rail is the one that's driving the finger size. And then we'll come over and make it a 7 1/4. And then you'll notice right in here that all those just got cut. I didn't worry about these. I can manipulate that with this here. Okay. So the last part of this project will be to finish out the shank. And so we'll come over here to rings and pick the open shank. Wait for that to load. Okay. Now, here's some library items of different shank profiles that are already mixed up. The one that I'm interested in feels kind of like this one, so I'm going to click on number 2. And then I'm going to immediately come over here and make it the correct finger size, which is 7 1/4. There we go. Okay, next I'm going to go to the top and I'm going to open up that shank so that it comes down here. And we'll just make it so that it hits those prongs and that bezel, but not the stone. And the top width is 1.6. That actually looks pretty good. The top thickness is a bit heavy, so we'll take that down to about 1.7 or so. And if we wanted this to be a weighted shank, we could just leave that like that. If not, we would go down to bottom, and the width will take down to 1.6 or 7, and the bottom as well. And there is that. And then you can come in and explore the different cross sections. Maybe we want this to not be quite so hard edged. So the top profile, I'll come over here and pick number 2, which is kind of just a kind of a rounded corner profile. And then at the bottom, I'm gonna really round it over and do this kind of D-shaped cross section. Okay, if everything looks good, we'll go ahead and hit OK. And there is a layout that came from Matrix, and we were able to pretty quickly finish that off. Okay, so the next thing I would like to do is talk about a little bit about Sub D and show a project that I have been working on for a company. And let's go ahead and open this up. So here's my Mammoth phone holder. So I was working on a line of objects that are based on animals, and they also hold your cell phone. Now, I will go on record as saying this is not a B9 print. B9 prints look better than this. This is off my FDM printer, so it's a little proof of concept. But having said that, I've got a little key ring here. So the idea is you could hook this to your backpack or keychain or something, and then pop it on your desktop and then put your phone in it. So there it is holding the phone vertically, and there it is holding it horizontally. All right. So let's go ahead and open the Mammoth up. And I am not the king of sub D modeling, but I've done some. And here is my Mammoth. And what I've got going on here is the left side is the side that I would manipulate, and the right side is the mirrored side, and that's why it's darker over here. And so this started out as a quad ball. So Actually, I think it started out as a sub D box, if I'm not mistaken, but it might have been a quad ball. Anyway, so if we were going to manipulate this, now I think what makes this guy look like a mammoth is they've got kind of this crowned head and the high shoulder, and then their back kind of slants off. If we wanted to make this into a elephant, I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to switch my gumball to align to the selected surface. And you know, Rhino 7 with sub D modeling is super powerful. And then the ability to hold down Shift and Control and select on either edges or faces is has been around in Rhino, but it's certainly very powerful. Let's go ahead and pull this out a bit, and we'll grab this one and pull it out, and then maybe we'll take this one and pull it up. And to me, that is more of a rotund, cute elephant. But there's just a, oh, and if, let's say you wanted to have the legs be a little longer or shorter, we could just select those and pull them down. And so if you haven't messed around with sub D, it's very fulfilling. And there you go. So having done the mammoth, I thought it would be cool to maybe bling him up a little bit. And so I'm going to open up another version of the mammoth here. And this is the original one. And I converted it to B-reps, or a NURB surface. So you can see the topology has changed. And then what I did is I drew a line right along here, and then around and up, and I projected that onto the surface and split it. Now, I'm going to use Panther's Pave builder, which is very powerful and works really well, which is the idea when you're making software. But I can tell you, having used it, that it's not a big fan of having a surface that is made up of a bunch of subsurfaces that we see here. So this is a big poly surface, and I would like this to be much more predictable. So I want to make it one surface. Now in Rhino 7, there's a function called quad remesh. And it's really handy for taking, let's say, STLs, maybe it's scan data or something, and you can convert it to a quad mesh. And then once you have that mesh, you can actually go to sub D or back to a B-rep or NURB surface. So having said all that, I'm going to go ahead and select all this one surface, and I'm actually going to type quad. And then here it autofills quad remesh. So let's go ahead and select that. And the default 2000 and adaptive size of 50 actually works just fine for this. Isn't that convenient? I'm not going to convert it to sub D. That's not the goal. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And then there is my new swank quad surface, and I'm immediately going to go put that on a different layer. So there we go. And then I'll turn off the red layer so we don't have to look at that. And there is my surface. Okay, with that done, we'll go ahead and go over to gems, and let's do the Pave builder. Okay, then some gems start to fly in the screen, and I never get sick of seeing that. I'm going to pick the center one, and I'm going to move that over into the top section of his back up here. And I don't have to be super careful about lining this up. I mean, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, but that actually will work just fine. And then I'm going to come over and change the margin down to 0.15, which is how close can it get to the border of the edge here. And then the space between gems, I'm going to make 0.1, okay? And we have 7 whole gems out here. If we want to see some pave, we're going to take the number of gems up. And I've done this demo just a couple times. And so I know that I need to be up around into about the 260 or so range. And then we sit and watch Panther go in and pack all these circles and do the best layout that it can. And I usually save Pave for Friday night because I don't get out much and I like to watch it. So there's my life. But as you can see, it does really a pretty great job of looking at the border and tracing around that edge and then going in and packing what it can. You might notice a couple holes. There's kind of here. I don't know if I'd fix that. And this one perhaps for sure. And the thing is that when I did this layout, I picked just one gem size, okay? I just have it set at max and min of 1.5, which actually for the builder, to me is a bit harder to do because when it can use different sizes, it can pack more efficiently. So I purposefully just left it on 1 so you could see how it worked. But down here, we have the ability to add or move or delete gems and so on. And so go ahead and give you an example of that. So I can just come over here and click, and then it'll put a gem there, and then all the other ones kind of react to that. And you can very quickly edit a layout. And so I think I'm going to stop there. I'm getting a little short on time of where I wanted to be. But there is that. I committed that. And now let's go ahead and select those stones. And we'll come over to the gem settings. And here is the pave prongs. And we will wait for that because there's a lot of prongs being put out there right now. And I don't know that I have time for a joke. No, I don't. Okay. So, all right, so this has a feature where you can change all the different parameters, the taper and the so on, and then we can add or move prongs just like we did with Pave. So if we come in here and say, okay, well, you know, these don't seem quite right down here. So I can move this one and move this one and so on. And then if we need to fill a gap or add more, we would just come over here to add prong and maybe do a layout kind of like that where we kind of fill it up. I don't know, maybe like that. And you can just go around and move stuff and add it and fix all this really very quickly. And if we're happy with that, we say okay. And I'm going to go ahead and put those prongs on the yellow layer so it all looks the same. And then I'm going to turn off that gray mesh surface and turn back on my red one. And then I'll select the red and I'll select the yellow and I'll hit J for join and join those up. And now that is back to a closed poly surface. And real quick, like we'll go ahead and, oops, no, I think I'm like right clicking today or something. I don't know why I'm spazzing out. Must be giving a webinar or something. So let's go to cutters and we'll load a gem cutter. And let's go ahead and I'm gonna cooking show this thing again. Here's all the different cutters, shapes and sizes that you can do. And I've got one down here that I'm gonna click on. These are all ones that I added for different scenarios. And this is just a good predictable cutter. And with that, I'll hit go. And then let's go ahead and do a Boolean here, because what could be more fun than doing a Boolean during a webinar with 4,000 cutters? But let's do Boolean difference. And I can tell you that doing this demo, sometimes it will do all these and it works, and sometimes one of them fails. And I'm kind of hoping that one fails, but the reason is that Rhino 7 will show you which object was failing. It puts a little dot object up there. It's super handy, because before you were like, well, I don't know. Of course it worked, because I didn't care. But it will show you with a dot object. Let's say this one failed, it would put a little exclamation point here. And then you could do all the others and then address that one issue. But as far as that goes, we turn off the gems, and there is that blinged out Mammoth. Okay, well, there's more where that came from. So let's hit File New. Last thing I'd like to mention today is that all the functions that we were doing, whether it's the gem loader or heads or bezels or whatever, these are all Grasshopper components, okay? And so in the background, Panther's been using Grasshopper like crazy. And so if we type Grasshopper to enter that interface, I'm just going to hit File New here, New Document. I just want to show that the Panther components live right here. And so they should start to look familiar just from this webinar. Here's gems with the gem loader and so on. And here's the settings and different tools. And so we could certainly drag one of these out here and select it. And then you'll see there's our gem coming out there, happens to be the round one. And under gem cut, you could just wire in a number slider here, and you'll notice that a 0 is a round, a 1 is a princess, a 2 is a cushion. And so, all this, if you've messed with Grasshopper, this all looks familiar. If you haven't, you have a lot to learn, including me. And then we just take that output, wire it into the next thing, and you can make your own definitions based on these components. And away you go. So those are all part of the deal. And so that is a real quick demo of kind of taking a matrix object over into Panther, and then how Panther works, and some of the new Rhino 7 stuff. And that's how I spent my summer vacation.
All right, thank you so much for that, Kent. We're going to go ahead and start with the Q&A. So if you guys haven't already, you can go ahead and type your questions either into that Q&A tab or just chat them to the panelists. The first question we have for you, Kent, is that Panther seems pretty responsive. Is it faster than Matrix Gold?
I haven't really had the chance to play with Matrix Gold. At one time, I was going to get a copy, and because I was going to get in the Panther camp, I chose not to. And so the feedback that I've gotten from people that have looked, I guess I could turn on my video so people can see that I'm here talking. The comment that I hear is that it's easier than Matrix Gold. Now, that's not me saying it. It's different users that have either had Matrix Gold or do have it and have tried Panther. And so, the things that I did today, there was no smoke and mirrors. Those were all actual Panther objects, and you could see me dragging them around and making that stuff. So, there's some things that we all know that you have to make with sweep 1 or network serve for this or that, but there's a lot of other things that you just slide the sliders and can quickly make stuff.
Awesome. And our next question is, can you override the minimum and maximum on those sliders in Panther?
Yeah, some of them are coded such that you can only go so far. And that's a necessary evil sometimes. You know, back when I was involved with Counter Sketch, you had to limit sliders or geometry would just go haywire. Now, on some of the sliders that you saw me sliding, the slider for the Pave count, you know, it shows a range on the menu, but you can widen the menu and see more numbers or just keep sliding. And so many of the sliders will go from 0 way up. You just keep sliding the slider.
Awesome. Our next question is, when you start building in Panther, can you open Grasshopper and see how it is wired up?
That's a good question. No. I have not seen a way to do that yet, but I could certainly check with the Panther team and see if that is an option, but I have never done that.
All right, and if anyone has any more questions, it looks like we are at the end here. Let's see. Oh, we are getting a couple more.
Okay.
This first one here is, with the Pave tool, can you use different size stones at one time? Versus
Yes.
them all being the same size? Okay.
No, I just didn't. You can specify a range, but then you can go in and resize gems that are in the layout as it's active, or add larger or smaller ones to the document as well.
Awesome. And then let's see here. Can you use Panther tools with the default Rhino interface?
Yes, you can start Rhino 7. And then since Panther is a plugin, you can access the tools of Panther in Rhino 7. So if perhaps you're not a fan of the Panther interface or so on, or have some other things going on, maybe some other plugins that you use, you can do that.
All right, and is there a fillet function for curves and poly surfaces?
Yes, yes, that is simply a Rhino function. So for curves, you could do fillet or fillet corners, and for solids, you would do fillet edge.
All right. And you may have covered this, but do sub-D shanks work with Panther's parametric modeling?
Only in the sense that while you're in that function and mixing it up, you would have controls for the finger size, for the width, for the thickness, and so on. But depending on what functions you interact with for that, like for instance, if you did a Boolean or something, whether it's in the parametric features or not, it's gonna convert that to NURBS. And so it all depends on the workflow. But in and of themselves, they are parametric because you have to be able to mix up the size, thickness, proportions, and so on.
Awesome. Is there a mesh repair option in order to send to a 3D printer?
At this time, there is not.
Okay, and it looks like we've answered all of our questions. So thank you so much, Kent. And we will be taking a quick break here. We'll be starting our next one in 10 minutes. If anyone has any further questions for Kent, he will be on at the end of the day during our Q&A with our two panelists of the day. So thanks again, Kent.
All right, thank you.